Coast, but warm for many with temperatures reaching 19 Celsius. Staying fine as we move across the Midlands and into northwest England. Plenty of sunshine this afternoon with light winds for all. Feeling warm with temperatures approaching 20 Celsius towards the Manchester area. The sunshine will be more on the hazy side for northeastern parts of England, but staying fine and dry with light winds. Feeling warm in the sunshine too, with highs around 18 degrees. The odd light shower is possible across Orkney and Shetland, otherwise the whole of Scotland is looking dry and sunny this afternoon, with temperatures reaching the mid to high teens. The dry theme continues for Northern Ireland, with plenty of hazy sunshine to be enjoyed, feeling warm here too as temperatures reach 18 Celsius, with light winds for all. A risk of heavy or thundery showers for southwest England this evening, but fine and dry elsewhere, with some sunshine.
Join me, Anaya Falar and Iman, for the discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here. From big ideas to questions shaping the public conversation, we tackle the moral, cultural and political implications of news stories.
We need to share this conversation democratically.
It has become so toxic, this debate.
They relish this kind of discourse.
From fascinating guests to challenging ideas, you won't want to miss it. The discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here, GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates and strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, welcome, good afternoon. This is Real Britain with me, Bev Turner, covering for Darren Grimes today on TV, DAB and online. We're going to be discussing who is responsible for the obesity crisis and the World Health Organisation's power grab, plus a lot more. But first, it is the news with Miranda.
Thanks, Bev. Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister will visit Northern Ireland on Monday amid a political standoff at Stormont. It's after the Democratic Unionist Party blocked the election of an Assembly Speaker, preventing a new executive from forming. The move was a protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is designed to ensure free trade can continue across the land border. The DUP says it's not working and puts peace at risk. Party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson told GB News that the heart of the Good Friday Agreement is consensus, and not a single recently elected unionist agrees on the protocol.
It is harming our economy, it is undermining political stability, it actually contravenes the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement, because at the heart of that agreement is there shall be no change to the constitutional status of Northern Ireland without the consent of its people. And yet there has been no consent given for this protocol. And so if we're to restore power sharing on the basis of consent or consensus in Northern Ireland, then the protocol needs to be dealt with. And I've been calling on the government to take decisive action in the absence of agreement with the EU to remove the Irish Sea border.
Boris Johnson has revealed the first 50 migrants have been told they'll be sent to Rwanda within the next 2 weeks. In an interview with the Daily Mail, the Prime Minister says he's ready for a fight with what he calls lefty lawyers seeking to challenge the government's plans to offshore the asylum applications. He also renewed calls for workers to return to the office, saying working from home doesn't work and staff are more productive when they're in the workplace. Finland's president has spoken to his Russian counterpart about the country's plan to join NATO. President Sauli Niinistö says the phone conversation with Vladimir Putin was direct and without aggravation. The Kremlin says President Putin told Finland abandoning its neutrality and joining NATO would be a mistake. That's after a Russian power company cut electricity supplies to Finland this morning, claiming there were problems with payments. 2 new cases of monkeypox have been confirmed in England. One person is being treated at the infectious diseases unit at St Mary's Hospital in London. And health officials say the other person, who lives in the same house, is isolating but doesn't need care. They're not linked to a previous case identified earlier this month. Close contacts are now being notified as a precautionary measure. Health campaigners have accused the government of playing politics with the well-being of children by postponing a ban on unhealthy food promotions. Officials say they're deferring the buy one, get one free ban because of the unprecedented squeeze on household budgets. The Department of Health says special offers for food and drink that are high in fat, salt or sugar are now set to be banned from October next year. The podcast host, Deborah James, has thanked people for all the donations received and says it's been a surreal and humbling 5 days. Prince William visited the 40-year-old known as Bowel Babe to present her with a damehood after raising more than £5.7 million now for cancer research. She launched the Just Giving fundraiser earlier this week when she revealed she was receiving end-of-life care. The government has cut ties with the National Union of Students following allegations of anti-Semitism. The university's minister has ordered the NUS to be removed from all Department for Education groups and replaced with alternative representation. Michelle Donnellan is calling for other education bodies to take similar action and withdraw government funding. The Transport Secretary has promised to deliver the world's first net zero transatlantic flight next year. Grant Shapps has announced a competition fund to make the pledge possible. He says up to £1 million in funding will be made available over the next year to support the testing, research and personnel costs of the flight. And there's high hopes for Sam Ryder, who'll represent the UK in tonight's Eurovision final. The 32-year-old TikTok star is one of 25 acts competing for the top prize at the event being held in Turin in Italy. He'll be performing his pop song, Spaceman. Well, you're up to date. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now back to Real Britain with Bev Turner.
Welcome to Real Britain with me today, Bev Turner. I am not Darren Grimes. He's having a lovely time on his holiday. So here's what's coming up on today's show. The ban on 2-for-1 fast food deals has been dropped. We're going to debate, have we normalised obesity? And is losing weight the individual's responsibility or the government's? Also, the World Health Organization wants to have more power over the response to future pandemics. Really? Because they handled this one so brilliantly. And Rod Liddle joins me to explain why Lewis Hamilton is refusing to take off his jewellery when he races. Is he standing up to the oppressive health and safety madness, or just being a vain crybaby. That's what we're going to be talking about for the next hour. I would love to know your thoughts, of course, on all of those topics. Tweet me at GBNews, or you can email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online too on YouTube. And don't forget, Facebook. You'll find lots of brilliant content on the GB News page. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Is it sun shining outside? Thank you for joining me, Bev Turner, for the next 2 hours. Now, I want to talk to you just for a moment about freedom, as it struck me that it's a theme that runs throughout the big stories on today's show. And of course, that's not really surprising, given that we're emerging from a time in which global governments reached into the minutiae of citizens' lives like never before. And now we all, I think, have an obligation to consider what it means to be free. As one commentator said, freedom is like fresh air and clean water. You do not notice it's gone. You do not notice it until it's gone. It wasn't something I thought about at all. I was a home-owning, working mum of 3. I had nothing to hide, so what did I have to worry about freedom? And then in spring 2020, the government told me that I must be so terrified of a virus that I must stay in my house and not see my family. I really like my family, so if someone tells me not to see them, they need to have a very good reason. And it was soon obvious to me that the reason wasn't sufficiently dangerous and the lockdown measures weren't sufficiently effective to make any of their science-denying diktats logical. I then watched as we entered a period of tyranny by 1,000 cuts under the auspices of a crisis. The political notions of left versus right were ripped up to be replaced by authoritarian versus libertarian. I would go so far as to say moral versus immoral. Was it right to deprive a 103-year-old woman, a care home resident, from seeing her grandchildren? Of course not. It was cruel and nonsensical. But as the late filmmaker Albert Maysles said, tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance. We had a parliament with a completely flaccid opposition, a cosy media happy to look the other way whilst governments greased their palms with £300 million of advertising budget, filling prime-time pockets whilst some commercial brands were literally unable to sell their wares, never mind advertise them. The Bill Gates and taxpayer-funded BBC became a government propaganda machine, allowing no dissenting voice. Doormat judges deferred to medical experts while turning a blind eye to perverse financial conflicts of interest. And the police force seemed pressured into becoming agents of the state rather than representatives of the public. In today's show, we're going to be looking at the Public Order Bill, which will further impose restrictions on minority voices trying to be heard. Few of us admire public schoolboys gluing their faces to pavements. But are we in danger of surrendering our freedom to protest, another right that you never think you will need until one day you find that you do? And do you understand what the World Health Organization treaty actually means? Well, I'll be digging into that too. And believe me, if you didn't like the EU pulling our strings, just wait until the WHO rings the bell for the next pandemic and your democratically elected government potentially hands over all powers to global governance and a cast of protagonists ready to line their own pockets with cash. If you like freedom, it really is the stuff of nightmares. And what about the online world, a place which became a refuge for many freedom advocates to find each other during the pandemic? Well, the pending online safety bill will gag anyone who dares counter the next wave of groupthink. If you're already feeling that your freedom of speech is being choked, you really need to grasp the magnitude of what is coming next. And then we've got F1 hero Lewis Hamilton defending his freedom to face the danger of keeping in his nose stud whilst hurtling around a track at 200 miles an hour. Principled stand against health and safety gone mad, or a sad indictment of masculine vanity 2022 style. What a time to be alive. Obviously, you're free to switch off. Who am I to stop you? But I'd rather you stuck around. OK, this week the government ditched plans to ban 2-for-1 deals on some type of fast food. The policy they claimed would help tackle obesity, but in the end, it seems reducing options for cheap food during a cost of living crisis proved to be a bad look. But is government action like this ban the answer to our obesity crisis? The World Health Organization seems to think so. Last week, the latest report argued that the focus of the obesity debate should move from the individual to societal causes. Joining me now is writer and campaigner Amy Nickel, and the presenter of Fat Family, Steve Miller, might be joining us, but we're waiting to see. So, Amy, it's just me and you now, right? You are a campaigner, an advocate, is it fair to say, for the body positivity movement.
I think that's fair to say.
Explain to people what you mean by that.
So I think that every time we talk about obesity, we end up in a conversation that stigmatises larger bodies, which can be just as healthy as a smaller body. And health isn't always indicated by your size. Now, I'm not talking about people living with obesity, which I consider, I don't even understand why it's up for a debate, but it's a disease. Obesity is a disease that some people have. But when you're born, in society, we accept that we can have massively varied different intelligence levels, we're different heights, our eye colours are all different. But one thing that we really seem to struggle with is that we're all different sizes and shapes. And there's an expectation to all be roughly the same. And I find that absolutely baffling. So if you don't fit in that societal norm, you can't understand why. And someone who is living in, say, a size 16 body can eat exactly the same as someone in a size 8 body, but that's just their set weight. Everybody has a set weight.
OK, that's where we disagree, Amy, because I don't believe that everybody has a set weight. I could, if I wanted to be, could be a lot larger than I am.
But you would have to fight your set weight.
What do you mean?
You'd have to fight
well, I
your
have
set
to fight
weight.
what I eat and drink every day, and I have to fight to get out of the door to go for a walk when I don't want to.
And that's what I don't want people to have to do. I want people to be able to embrace their natural set weight, which actually, to get away from it, you have to work really quite hard. You have to do some quite extreme things.
So just going back to what you were saying about the fact that there's this pressure on people to look a certain way.
Yeah.
Well, you're younger than me, OK, so but we have grown up with a similar sort of era of looking at what the stereotypical Western definition of beauty is, as you say, 10 or 12, hopefully slightly big boobs, shiny hair. It has been a very narrow definition.
It's changing, though, isn't it?
It is changing, and that worries the heck out of me, Amy, because do you know why? I've got 2 daughters who are 13 and 11, and I want them to be able to run around with their children one day without having bad knees, and I don't want them to have diabetes, and I don't want them to have heart disease, and I don't want them to be have a fatty liver because they've eaten fast food non-stop.
But so you understand that they're two different arguments, and you can have a fatty liver and be a size 6.
True.
You can be very, very unhealthy and be thin. What I'm saying is your size isn't indicative of your health status.
Oh,
and we need to stop.
We
need to stop looking at it like that, because it stigmatises larger bodies, which actually drives eating disorders. One of the main reasons we have binge eating disorder, which is completely on the rise at the moment, the rates, is because people are fighting to stay smaller when they just can't manage it. So
why can't they manage it? This is the thing. So I think
because some people are naturally bigger.
They're not. That's
I think in your head you have a big, huge, unhealthy, like size 24. I'm just talking about a range between, say, a 6 and a 60, and they have equal merit, and they're probably each living very similar lifestyles. It's just your set weight. And I know this from going through therapy for an eating disorder of my own, that your set weight can be it could be an 8 to... you can have a healthy weight that is a slightly larger body.
But that sounds very science-denying to me, Amy, to say that the amount of calories you take in against the amount of calories you burn off is set.
But
that's completely.
But that's my point.
Opposite
so if an adult
to
eats 2,000 calories a day, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a size 10. That's what my point is.
Because it depends on how much they move, you mean?
No, because it depends on what your set weight is. It's like you saying, how come people can be 5 foot or 6 foot and you're perfectly comfortable with that? You're not in control of that, are you? In a similar way, your body, your set weight, is something that can vary, and it's not.
If that was true, none of us could ever lose. But none of us could ever lose or put on weight.
But for some people, it's very, very difficult for some people to lose weight. It's very simple for some people to lose weight because we're all unique. It's within our DNA as to how predisposed we are to be bigger or smaller. That's a fact. And if you keep fighting against that, that's what causes disordered eating, and that's what causes unhealthy habits.
I think. Do you know what's interesting? I never thought I would say this, but as a mother of 2 daughters, I'm much less worried now about them having an eating disorder than I am about them aspiring to be fat. Because what I'm seeing, I know I can see your face is like, I can't believe you just said that. But when I go into shops and I see plus-size mannequins and I see plus-size advertisements which are normalising our perception of what is healthy, not necessarily what is beautiful, because I still think you can be big and gorgeous.
A larger person is not necessarily unhealthy. That's just not true. It's not true. A larger body can be, 2/3 of women are size 16 or above. They are not all unhealthy.
That's right, and that's getting higher every day. But they aren't as healthy as if they were. If you do a body scan, I was talking to a doctor the other day actually, who was saying that she's always surprised when she sees an X-ray of a person and there's a thin person inside every large person. And when we see what the obesity, and I'm not saying that being thin is easy, I'm not, and our debate was going to be about whether it's responsibility of the individual as opposed to the responsibility of the state. But I think it's not easy, but we have to surely, I feel like we've surrendered to everyone just being overweight, because everybody's just going to be healthy.
I think we need to surrender to the fact that everyone is unique and that some people will have larger bodies and they shouldn't be stigmatised, because that's what drives unhealthy eating habits. 100%.
What do you mean by stigmatised? How does that manifest
Because larger bodies are stigmatised. If you just said there, I wouldn't want my daughter to be fat.
Because I want her to be healthy, Amy. But that's not because of what she looks like.
But Bev, that's the problem. You're conflating health issues with larger bodies, and that's wrong.
So are you saying that as we've seen obesity increase exponentially over the last 30 years in this country, and we've seen the NHS crippled by lifestyle-related illnesses, that is a complete coincidence and the two have nothing?
I think they can remain separately. Obviously, you can increase your size and become unhealthy, but then the bodies aren't inherently unhealthy. And I know I hate to bring personal experience into debates.
No, I think because it's a person, but it is a personal issue.
But I'm much healthier now than when I was very underweight, and possibly when I got the most compliments, people said I looked fantastic. I was desperately unhealthy, so I was fighting my set weight. I'm possibly, I'm a size 12 now. I managed to get myself to be a size 6 for years, but it was hard.
Yeah.
Because I was fighting against my own...
Would you want to be a size 22?
But unfortunately, there is a tiny minority of people... Not unfortunately. There is just a minority of people that are larger, and it's natural for them. And I hate the way this society stigmatises those people and makes them feel ashamed of their natural body. It's like...
But babies aren't born obese. Children aren't born obese. They become obese because of lifestyle, poor education, poor diet. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's blooming hard.
I feel like we're having two different conversations, because you're talking about that all the things you've just mentioned and obesity, and there's a section of obese people what your argument would apply to, but I believe that there's far more people who either have obesity genetically as a disease, which needs treatment. And I find it really interesting how the government do very little with treating obesity as a disease and giving people the treatment that they need and deserve. And instead, they resort to things like putting calories on menus, which is just unhelpful. And this 2-for-1 that we were discussing earlier, it's almost like you're putting a sticky plaster on a big wound that you caused. Like, they need to go to the root cause. And I think that accepting that bodies come in all different shapes and sizes is the beginning of that.
OK. Thanks, Amy. That's not the conversation I thought we were going to have. I enjoyed it anyway. It's lovely to see you. Plenty more to come. Plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. Next up, a conference next weekend is bringing together the global superheroes of pandemic counterculture for the first time in the UK. The names on this list, if you're interested in this topic, will blow you away. But one council has tried to stop them. I'll tell you who after the break and find out exactly what happened from internet superstar Del Bigtree. But first, let's have a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking fine and dry, but the increasing risk of showers moving into southwest England. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off in southwest England, and there'll be a risk of showers here this evening. Some could be heavy, with the risk of some hail and thunder. Southeast England and London will be dry at 7 o'clock this evening, though the risk of showers increases later, feeling warm and muggy. Much of Wales will be dry this evening, but there will be an increasing risk of showers in the south, some perhaps heavy and thundery. Over to the Midlands, and it will be dry with sunny spells this evening, but the risk of a few showers perhaps moving into the far south later. Feeling warm and humid. It'll be a fine end to the day across northern England, with plenty of sunshine ahead of dusk. Patches of cloud, but dry with temperatures around 15 Celsius, making it rather warm. A few lingering showers across Shetland, otherwise a fine and dry end to the day across Scotland, with light winds and plenty of sunny spells before dusk. 16 degrees in Edinburgh. Northern Ireland will see a fine end to Saturday with sunshine for all, albeit rather hazy. On the warm and humid side here too, with Belfast around 17 degrees Celsius. Heavy showers will continue to move northwards as we move into the early hours, some perhaps thundery. The driest weather found across Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Join me, Anaya Falarin Iman, for the discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here. From big ideas to questions shaping the public conversation, we tackle the moral, cultural and political implications of news stories.
We need to share this conversation democratically.
It has become so toxic, this debate.
They relish this kind of discourse.
From fascinating guests to challenging ideas, you won't want to miss it. The discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here, GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, a major conference on learning lessons from the pandemic will go ahead next weekend, despite attempts to stop it from, in my view, a cowardly local council. The Better Way conference will be the first time that renowned global voices, such as Bret Weinstein, Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Peter McCulloch and GBNews' own Neil Oliver, will have come together in the UK. But because the key speakers are united by a belief in questioning the prevailing global narrative of the last 2 years, the conference has been deemed too controversial. Organisers, the World Council for Health, had booked the council-owned assembly rooms in Bath with around 2,000 people expected to attend. But the local authority cancelled the booking, claiming it would bring their name and reputation into disrepute. Luckily, the event has secured a new private venue. And to explain all of this, I am truly delighted to say that we are joined by the event's MC, award-winning producer and host of The High Wire, Del Bigtree. Del, thank you so much for joining us. We get to speak eventually. We've been trying to do this for a while now, I know that. You're talking to us from Texas. Tell me about the conference. Why do we need it in the first place? And why was it potentially cancelled?
Well, I mean, first of all, this is one of the most important conferences maybe of all times. We are looking back in hindsight at one of the most catastrophic displays of bad science and bad policy around the world. We have let, pharmaceutical-driven, lobby-driven politicians making decisions, health departments, when really people should be in charge of their bodies, their doctors should be making choices. So this is a conference of scientists and doctors, world-renowned experts from around the world that are not being funded by pharma and that do not work for the government, but have their own private investigations into what they have found based on this virus. There's going to be huge discussions about what this virus is and what it is not, where it's at now. Are we out of the pandemic? Is it over? Was it ever here? We're going to have discussions about treatments that were used, those that were not allowed, all of these conversations that should be popular in the entire world. The fact that this conference was canceled because or at least the location was in Bath that we were going to be at, because they don't like the content that could be controversial. What is controversial about letting world-renowned scientists, including, as you mentioned, Dr. Robert Malone, inventor of the mRNA vaccine platform? I mean, if that guy is controversial when he wants to talk about, one of the most popular vaccine that we used, then we really have problems. And that just shows you where we're at now, where real scientists with real degrees, and some of them the most published in their fields, are going to be speaking at this event. So it's incredibly important. And this type of censorship of scientific voices is why we have found ourselves scratching our heads and locked down and watching our careers destroyed and our economies destroyed. We should have always allowed these scientists to speak. That's what this event is all about.
So, for instance, Dr. Peter McCulloch, who you mentioned, even before COVID was even a figment of the Chinese government's imagination, he was the leading cardiologist, the leading published cardiologist in the world. He had immense credibility. And the idea that come 2022, that would be the kind of man who would be considered too controversial. It's not really, as you say, Del, it's not really the misinformation, the science. Of course, there's been so much confusion in the last 2 years, but it's about the censorship. It's about the fact that the consensus seems to be that there is consensus, if you know what I mean. And science is, by very definition, not a place of consensus.
I mean, that's what we have to realize. It is absolutely not a place of consensus. In fact, if you think back throughout history, there's been no evolution in science, no advancement that happened by a consensus vote. All advancements in science happens because one scientist or one team sees something differently than the rest of the world did. That is why we are told from the time we're taking our first science classes, in elementary school and in high school, when they say that the science is never settled. This is something that should always be being questioned. We have watched through the years as Galileo is arrested for saying that the earth is not the center of the universe. We have got to stop, censoring and arresting requesting scientific voices when they are giving a different perspective. And in this case, the perspective that's being given is now being shared. There's multiple documents, group documents being shared with over 17,000 scientists and experts around the world that are speaking to the perspective you're going to hear at this conference. This idea that the science is settled is absolutely not true. Even the fact that there's a consensus behind what was done is not true. And we've seen the failings of this vaccine. All the vaccines failed to stop infection. Omicron has swept through the vaccinated, and most of these scientists were saying that was going to happen from the day one when they started talking about this vaccine. So why is it that they had it right? They said the vaccine would be a leaky vaccine, unable to stop the variants that would be coming, and yet they are still considered controversial. And those scientists that got it wrong told us that lockdowns would work, that masking would work, that the vaccine would get us out of this pandemic, and now we're being told we're going to have to learn to live with it. I'm going to stick with the scientists that had it right from the beginning, and shockingly, those are the ones that are being called controversial. That shows you how crazy this world is that we live in right now.
Now, a lot of people, I hear it regularly, will say, well, we wouldn't be where we are now if we hadn't had these vaccine rollouts, and regardless of whether you think it's a good idea to indiscriminately vaccinate all age groups during a pandemic, it did help and continues to help the elderly and those who are already ill or those who are immune compromised. That's the position of the majority, Del, I think it's fair to say. Do you still feel vindicated? That's a question I get asked a lot. Do you feel vindicated for the position that you've taken for the last 2 years?
You know, I don't work for vindication. I've just been, delivering the science as we see it. But where we are at now is somewhere we've never been before. For the first time in history, this bad vaccine has kept us from achieving herd immunity. Every other virus that we've ever come in contact with, ultimately we achieve herd immunity where it cannot be transmitted throughout the population because our immune systems ultimately mount a defense, we neutralize the virus, and we kill it dead. For the first time in history, we are stuck with a virus that is not going away. We are staying at high levels of infection. Those levels of infection at the moment are mild because this is a mild form of the virus, but at any moment this could turn in another direction, and that is all because of a vaccine that kept us from achieving herd immunity. This is a disaster, and if one of the great scientists is going to be at this event, Geert van den Bosch, out of Belgium, is very concerned, is going to be talking about the science of how this variant, the next variant, could get around. It's already gotten around stopping the vaccine's infection. It could become more deadly. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I want to hear about this conference this weekend. I want people to buy tickets online if they are interested in science, regardless of if they disagree and they, are absolutely subscribing to the idea that the advice they've received for the last 2 years has been in their benefit. I think that this will be a great conference for people to log on to or to buy tickets to go and attend at the weekend. Give us an idea of which other speakers are there. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be in town. Geert van den Bosch, as you said.
Yeah. Geert van den Bosch, he was one of the great immunologists, virologists of our time. We're going to have Pierre Corey, who was the scientist in the United States that discovered how effective ivermectin was, went before our Congress to promote ivermectin's use, something that was blocked really around the world. Why were we blocking drugs that were proving to be effective? Discussions on hydroxychloroquine, a drug that even Tony Fauci himself had done studies at the NIH that proved it was effective against the SARS coronavirus back in 2005. We're going to have, as I said, Dr. Robert Malone, inventor of the mRNA technology. Dr. Ryan Cole, a world-renowned pathologist that's been looking at the blood clotting being caused by these vaccines. Just last week, Johnson & Johnson is now withdrawing the recommendation of Johnson & Johnson because of the blood clots. Again, we now recognize that this vaccine that was promoted and basically forced on our population here in the United States of America, turns out it was deadly, causing blood clots, heart attacks, strokes. So we're going to talk to the scientists that were saying that was a problem from the beginning. So the list goes on and on. It's a 3-day event. It's being held in Bath. It's going to be truly groundbreaking.
It's going to be great. And I think, and having spoken to Dr. Tess Laurie, who's one of the organisers as well, and she was very clear to say this is about moving forward. It is not about pointing fingers. It is about finding a new way, empowering individuals to take control of their health. There's going to be Majid Nawaz there from the UK, Neil Oliver, as I say, loads of great journalists, medics, and you're going to be emceeing the weekend. Dale, thank you so much. I wish you all the best with it. I might see you down there. Good luck with the weekend. Dale Bigtree there, the host of The High Wire.
Everybody go to the betterwayconference.org. If you want to check it out, betterwayconference.org. It's going to be amazing.
Thank you so
we'll see you
much.
there.
Right, we got to catch up with the news. See you in a mo.
Good afternoon, it's 2:36. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister will visit Northern Ireland on Monday amid a political standoff at Stormont. It's after the Democratic Unionist Party blocked the election of an Assembly Speaker, preventing a new executive from forming. The move was a protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol. DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson told GB News that the heart of the Good Friday Agreement is consensus, and not a single recently elected unionist agrees on the post-Brexit trading agreement.
It is harming our economy. It is undermining political stability. It actually contravenes the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement, because at the heart of that agreement is there shall be no change to the constitutional status of Northern Ireland without the consent of its people. And yet there has been no consent given for this protocol. And so if we're to restore power sharing on the basis of consent or consensus in Northern Ireland, then the protocol needs to be dealt with. And I've been calling on the government to take decisive action in the absence of agreement with the EU to remove the Irish Sea border.
Boris Johnson has revealed the first 50 migrants have been told they'll be sent to Rwanda within the next 2 weeks. In an interview with the Daily Mail, the Prime Minister says he's ready for a fight with what he calls lefty lawyers seeking to challenge the government's plan for asylum seekers. Finland's president has spoken to his Russian counterpart about the country's plan to join NATO. President Sauli Niinisto says the phone conversation with Vladimir Putin was direct and without aggravation. The Kremlin says President Putin told Finland abandoning its neutrality and joining NATO would be a mistake. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. We'll be back to Real Britain with Bev Turner in just a moment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, this next segment is called Back to Basics, and the aim is for us to explain a topic in the news that you might have recently come across, but perhaps not fully got your head around. There's something every day, is there not? Today, it's the World Health Organization's pandemic treaty. What is it, and what could it mean for you and your life? Well, I'm very happy to say that joining me now is James Melville, writer and social commentator. James, hello. Do you feel that this issue is attracting the attention of the media and the public in the way that it should? Because it almost doesn't come up if you Google it.
There's nothing there. I mean, it's almost misinformation by suppression. This potentially is a massive deal. It's hugely significant. There is a risk, for instance, that the WHO and the technocrats involved in the WHO supersede 194 countries' public health policy. And I agree, I think the majority of the public are unaware of this. There's not much coverage about this. Getting information is difficult in terms of mainstream media, and actually trying to inform the details to the wider public is almost impossible. This is something that's a form of mission creep, like a lot of policies seem to be happening in individual countries about taking away individual freedoms, whether it's online security, Human Rights Act reforms, police bills in the UK. But to get the WHO to put a set, at the moment, of ambiguous laws in place, more detail will come from this, that might broad brush across a number of different countries is extremely concerning. Every single country and every single individual is different in terms of public health care, both in terms of autonomy, but also policy. And for the WHO to effectively not threaten, but propose a universal policy of public health around a pandemic is extremely concerning. And the general information and public knowledge on this is limited, to say the least. So if we explain what this is then, James, effectively, what countries are signing up to, we're not quite there yet. And I think the event to sign up to this is actually only a week or so away for the initial outline, which would be ratified by September. And in the event of the World Health Organization identifying a global pandemic or a global pandemic about to start, then at that point, they take over our public health policy. So the government at the time, whether it's this year or 10 years' time, whatever, will step back and say, you make the decisions. It's not my call. Why would they agree to that? I mean, this is the thing. I mean, if you look at Boris Johnson, for instance, he was a self-styled freedom fighter regarding Brexit to claw back sovereignty from, in his words, meddling bureaucrats at the EU. And I say that as a Remainer, because I was concerned about the economic damages of Brexit. But he's effectively contradicting what he said there. If he's willing to allow the WHO, in whatever form that is, we don't know what that form is, but you know, it risks putting a lot of things in there in terms of general public health, but also potentially mandates that restrict personal health autonomy. He's contradicting the very thing he said about Brexit. So while we've gone through the consultation programme, various states are showing at the moment either interest or apathy about taking a step back from this. And once we see the details of this emerge, there is an argument, like there was with Brexit, that this goes to a public vote. Depending on the details, surely something as important as a public health policy that is rolled out across the WHO that has huge impacts country by country, potentially broad brushing it, that should be the decision of the people to decide whether they want to take part in that. And so there is an argument down the tracks that from a UK point of view, potentially elsewhere, but from a UK point of view, there is a referendum about this. And the reason a referendum would be important is it would allow the public to gain knowledge about this. It goes back to your first question. At the moment, there's a lack of information out there. So there is an argument that a referendum where you get both sides of the debate can discuss and debate this under freedom of speech, and most important of all, to develop public understanding about what the impact and the implications are of this treaty.
They argue that the WHO and various world leaders and the people in positions of decision-making, they argue that if we have this organisation, this treaty that we all agree to, there would be no, for instance, there would be no difference in countries that could get vaccines as quickly as any others at a time when they may be very much in need. And yet, the people who are going to profit from those drugs are also funding the World Health Organization. That, for me, seems like a significant conflict of interest that everybody seems to be ignoring.
Yeah, There's a huge conflict of interest. If you look at the funding streams of the WHO, it used to just be about member states funding. Now you're having corporate funding and one or two rich individuals funding as well. So there is naturally a conflict of interest under the auspice of public health. And also the second part, even looking at the pandemic, there's different approaches in different countries. If you look at the model of Sweden, they held their nerve, and actually in the long term, in terms of excess death rates, in 2021, they had one of the lowest excess death rates in Europe. So there's an argument for Sweden, because they didn't lock down, might have been the best policy, because they didn't have the collateral damage attached to that. If you have the WHO broad brush approach to a pandemic, then what they're saying effectively, all countries fundamentally have to agree to their terms and conditions and potentially their diktats. And based on the fact that public health is very different on a country-to-country basis, surely the approach should be down to the individual governments, and actually in terms of personal autonomy, should be the relationship that an individual has with their own healthcare provider and also their state of health. At the moment, it's opening up loads of questions. We don't know the actual detail. But when we do get to the detail, there is definitely an argument that this has to have not just a consultation and information exercise for the public, but there's an argument that we go further through democratic means and take it to referendum.
Thank you, James. We may not have known much before, but we know a lot more now. Thank you so much for joining us. Right, moving on. The next segment is called a Scrap, Reform or Keep. And every week we take one bit of legislation or policy and ask if it's fit for purpose. This week, we're looking at planning law. Should we scrap it, reform it or keep it? In the Queen's speech earlier this week, we learned that the government wants to introduce so-called street votes as an alternative to traditional forms of planning permission. Neighbours could be allowed to vote on whether planning permission should be given for developments such as house extensions on their own street. Is this a good idea, or is it a recipe for neighbours going to war? Well, joining me now is Freddie Poser, Director of Priced Out. Good afternoon, Freddie. First of all, I know you have very strong opinions on our planning policy. So overall, is it good, Freddie? Should we be keeping it, scrapping it, or reforming it?
Well, I don't think that you could realistically scrap planning permission, but it's completely broken as an area of government policy, and we know that because we simply don't build enough homes. We don't build them in the right place. We don't build them of a high enough quality, and planning permission is really the main reason that happens. So we need to really seriously reform planning.
What do you think, Freddie, about this idea then that as neighbours we'll be able to OK somebody's new conservatory? Because I think it's got the potential to be so divisive on streets and amongst what might be already friends at the moment. I think it could be an anarchy on our streets, frankly.
So it's not asking your neighbour if it's okay that you build a conservatory. The idea of street votes is that you would grant the whole street some rights to develop, and whether or not you decided to exercise those rights on your own property, you're gaining some benefit from that, because your house price will then change because you've got the ability to expand it. Even if you don't want to do it yourself, the person you might sell it to knows that they can increase the area, add another unit, for example. So I don't think this will put streets against each other. I think this is a win-win for people who know that we need to build more houses in this country, and for homeowners who have a new tool to shape how the area they live in develops.
You know, I was wondering your opinion on this as well, if you don't mind, Freddie, while you're here. We've got so many office blocks now which are barely being used, 50% occupancy, a lot of them in central locations with excellent Wi-Fi, with great infrastructure in the building. Would you like to see some action to try and develop, or do you think it will inevitably happen, that a lot of these buildings will become affordable, in inverted commas, housing maybe for the younger generation like yourself?
Well, I think that it's an interesting example, and there will certainly be places where that might be important. So in London, for example, if people really aren't going to return to the offices after the pandemic. And, you know, this is an element where I'd like to see regulation be a bit looser, where the market can decide. But in general, I don't think that's going to be enough. We need to build more homes. You know, even if you got a few years of supply out of office blocks, in the end, the population continues to grow. We need better, more affordable homes across this country. So I think that would be a bit of a sticking plaster at best.
OK, all right. Thank you so much for joining us, Freddie. We will wait and see. Thank you so much. I think we're at a stage in time when I think with our planning issue, I think we've got a real problem. We've got a housing shortage. We've got offices empty and a lot of people who want homes. OK, now, a story which caught my eye this week and had me banging my head on the desk. Lewis Hamilton, the 7 times F1 World Drivers' Championship winner, has vowed to leave the world's most popular motorsport if the bosses make him take out his nose piercing. I kid you not. And it got me thinking about what on earth has happened to modern man. And who better to discuss this than someone who is all man, writer Rod Liddell. Rod, lovely to see you. I am all for, he's not here at the moment, I don't think. Oh, he is here. OK. I'm all for a principled sportsman who isn't afraid to take a stand, Rod Liddell. But is this just a tale of vanity over sporting victory?
Well, it seems to me, as everything else is with Lewis Hamilton, a tale of petulance. I can rarely read anything about the bloke, and I don't read very much about him, I have to say, because unlike you, Beverly, I'm not a huge fan of Formula One. In fact, I'd rather spend my life watching an insurance seminar than a Formula One race. But he has this wonderful knack of alienating everybody. And here he is. He's this black guy who, against all the odds, a mixed race guy, really, from Stevenage, working class background, and has managed to get himself into a position the motor car driver or whatever the hell you call it, you guys, that we've ever had. And he should really be getting lots of plaudits for this. But then he opens his mouth, and out comes this kind of woke whining. And now he's whining about his nose piercings. It's just beyond credulity for me, I'm afraid, Beverly. I would have thought you thought the same.
Well, I do. I mean, but I don't know what to make of it, Rod, because at first I just thought, oh, typical blimmin' millennial who's more bothered about keeping his piercings in than doing the job that he's meant to do for the team that employs him and all of the sponsors that back him to the tune of several £1 million a year. And then I listened to his reasons, and his reasons were that it isn't a health and safety risk, which is what the sport is saying, that, you know, if he's driving his car at 200 miles an hour and he hits a barrier, somebody has to take his helmet off, he might hurt his nose with his piercing. And then I was like, OK, Lewis Hamilton, now I'm on your side, because that is ridiculous.
Oh, I don't think it is. I mean, and there are the same kind of rules which you've always had in football, certainly about earrings, when, you know, back in the day when footballers tended to have one single stud earring or one of those little chains, you know, that hangs down. That was always considered as being very, very dangerous. And I assume it's the same thing with Formula One. And the problem is, it's a battle here between two hugely unlikable entities. There's Lewis Hamilton on one side, and then on the other side, there's a convocation of thugs and fascists who run Formula One. And it really is difficult to know whose side one is on. Whenever I hear Lewis Hamilton speaking about issues where he thinks he has the right to speak, and of course he does have the right to speak, I always think, Lewis, mate, if you're going to be this woke and this right on, pay your taxes here. Do that for a start. That would cheer me up. If you could just pay your taxes here instead of being resident in either Switzerland, Monaco, or Colorado, you know, I'd be much happier. Same thing, of course, goes for Saint Bono of U2. And it's the same kind of thing.
Is the thing is, Rod,
managed to carve out for himself as well a kind of a look which most men, I suspect, and quite a lot of women, I would guess as well, find ludicrous beyond belief.
Well, this is the thing. The other angle of this story, of course, is not just the health and safety angle. It's the fact that what does it say about him that he's proud to make a stand about his nose piercing. It makes me rather long for the days of James Hunt, when he would rock up to the track with a fag in one hand, a bottle of beer, having spent the night with 5 different women, and get in the car and win the World Championship. But maybe that's just us getting old, Rod. I mean, look at that. That's James Hunt on the screen. That's a real man. I'm not advocating smoking. Smoking is very bad for you. But after the last 2 years we've had, I think deciding the own parameters of your health should probably be up to you. But what a difference, though, in such a short period of time.
I know, but you see, I go back even further. I rather like Graham Hill, who looked like a kind of a Terry Thomas vignette of the 1940s and 50s. I mean, that's the guy I remember, and the guy who my parents remembered as well as Jackie Stewart, of course, who had very, very risque long hair and was rather looked down upon. It is a very conservative body, isn't it? I mean, you would know better than me, Bev, the Formula One people. I mean, they are very, very conservative. And you can see that Hamilton has his work cut out fighting them for the various things he believes in, such as the right for all men to walk around with ludicrous bloody nose piercings in. If he wants to sacrifice his career for that, then let him. It means we have to hear a little bit less from him.
All right, Rod Little. Well, it's always lovely to hear lots of you. I'm so sorry I have to cut you off, but nice to chat to you today. You know, there you go. Like I say, Lewis Hamilton, my goodness. OK, you've been watching Real Britain so far, first hour with me, Bev Turner. Lots more to come in the next hour. But first, let's take a quick break. Do stay with us.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking fine and dry, but the increasing risk of showers moving into southwest England. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off in southwest England, and there'll be a risk of showers here this evening. Some could be heavy, with the risk of some hail and thunder. Southeast England and London will be dry at 7 o'clock this evening, though the risk of showers increases later, feeling warm and muggy. Much of Wales will be dry this evening, but there will be an increasing risk of showers in the south, some perhaps heavy and thundery. Over to the Midlands, and it will be dry with sunny spells this evening, but the risk of a few showers perhaps moving into the far south later. Feeling warm and humid. It'll be a fine end to the day across northern England, with plenty of sunshine ahead of dusk. Patches of cloud, but dry with temperatures around 15 Celsius, making it rather warm. A few lingering showers across Shetland, otherwise a fine and dry end to the day across Scotland, with light winds and plenty of sunny spells before dusk. 16 degrees in Edinburgh. Northern Ireland will see a fine end to Saturday with sunshine for all, albeit rather hazy. On the warm and humid side here too, with Belfast around 17 degrees Celsius. Heavy showers will continue to move northwards as we move into the early hours, some perhaps thundery. The driest weather found across Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, And I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Real Britain with me, Bev Turner, on TV, DAB and online. It's just after 3 o'clock. In this hour, we're going to be discussing a new crackdown on protests and the potential threat to freedom that it poses, and Eurovision, if you care. But first, it's the news with Miranda.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3:01. The top stories now from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister will visit Northern Ireland on Monday amid a political standoff at Stormont. It's after the Democratic Unionist Party blocked the election of an Assembly Speaker, preventing a new executive from forming. The move was a protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is designed to ensure free trade can continue across the land border. The DUP says it's not working and puts peace at risk. Party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson told GB News that the heart of the Good Friday Agreement is consensus, and not a single recently elected unionist agrees on the protocol.
It is harming our economy. It is undermining political stability. It actually contravenes the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement, because at the heart of that agreement is there shall be no change to the constitutional status of Northern Ireland without the consent of its people. And yet there has been no consent given for this protocol. And so if we're to restore power sharing on the basis of consent or consensus in Northern Ireland, then the protocol needs to be dealt with. And I've been calling on the government to take decisive action in the absence of agreement with the EU to remove the Irish Sea border.
Labour has accused Boris Johnson of trying to start a trade war with Brussels. Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy says threats to tear up the Northern Ireland Protocol have come at the worst possible time.
Sabre-rattling and saying you're going to rip up the agreement that you struck just 3 years ago. That does not help anyone. It doesn't help the people of Northern Ireland. They're not asking for that, by the way, and it certainly doesn't help the prospects of a united Europe at this really important time.
Boris Johnson has revealed the first 50 migrants have been told they'll be sent to Rwanda within the next 2 weeks. In an interview with the Daily Mail, the Prime Minister says he's ready for a fight with what he calls lefty lawyers seeking to challenge the government's plans to offshore the asylum applications. He also renewed calls for workers to return to the office, saying working from home doesn't work and staff are more productive when they're in the workplace. Finland's president has spoken to his Russian counterpart about the country's plan to join NATO. President Sauli Niinisto says the phone conversation with Vladimir Putin was direct and without aggravation. The Kremlin says President Putin told Finland abandoning its neutrality and joining NATO would be a mistake. 2 new cases of monkeypox have been confirmed in England. One person is being treated at the Infectious Diseases Unit at St Mary's Hospital in London, and health officials say the other person, who lives in the same house, is isolating and doesn't require care. They're not linked to a previous case identified earlier this month. Close contacts are now being notified as a precautionary measure. A 41-year-old woman and 3 dogs have been killed by a car in West London. Officers were called to a street in Chelsea this morning. The Met Police says a 26-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Health campaigners have accused the government of playing politics with the well-being of children by postponing a ban on healthy food promotions. Officials say they're deferring the buy one, get one free ban because of the unprecedented squeeze on household budgets. The Department of Health says special offers for food and drink that are high in fat, salt or sugar are now set to be banned from October next year. The podcast host Deborah James has thanked people for all the donations received and says it's been a surreal and humbling 5 days. Prince William visited the 40-year-old known as Bow Babe to present her with a damehood after raising more than £5.7 million so far for cancer research. She launched the Just Giving fundraiser earlier this week when she revealed she was receiving end-of-life care. The government has cut ties with the National Union of Students following allegations of anti-Semitism. The university's minister has ordered the NUS to be removed from all Department for Education groups and replaced with alternative representation. Michelle Donnellan is calling for other education bodies to take similar action and withdraw government funding. And there's high hopes for Sam Ryder, who will represent the UK in tonight's Eurovision final. The 32-year-old TikTok star is one of 25 acts competing for the top prize at the event in Turin in Italy. He'll be performing his pop song Spaceman. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now back to Real Britain with Bev Turner.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Bev Turner. Now, here is what is coming up on today's show. How do we stop groups like Extinction Rebellion reaping havoc without taking away our freedoms? The new Law and Order bill is in the spotlight. Also, the NHS is in crisis again. Ambulance shortages have led to a spike in dangerous incidents. Is it time for reform? We're going to be debating that too. And the tragic but inspiring case of Deborah James. Her close friend who went through cancer treatment with Deborah will join us here to discuss how the story has captured the nation and what you can do to help the fight against cancer. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. I'd love to know your thoughts. Tweet me at GBNews, or you can email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch online too on YouTube. And don't forget Facebook, you'll find lots of brilliant content on the GB News page. Thanks for watching. Thank you for being here for the second and final hour of today's show. Now, I want to talk to you just for a moment about freedom, as it struck me that there is a theme that runs throughout the big stories on today's show. And of course, that's hardly surprising, given that we are emerging from a time in which global governments reached into the minutiae of citizens' lives like never before. And now all of us, I think, have an obligation to consider what it means to be truly free. As one commentator said, freedom is like fresh air and clean water. You do not notice it until it is gone. And it wasn't something that I thought about at all. I was a home-owning, working mum of three. I had nothing to hide, so what did I have to fear? What did I have to worry about freedom? And then in spring 2020, the government told us that we must be so terrified of a virus that we must stay in our homes, and so told me not to see my family. I like my family a lot. So if someone tells me not to see them, they need to have a very good reason. And it was soon obvious to me that the reason wasn't sufficiently dangerous and the lockdown measures weren't sufficiently effective to make any of their diktats logical. I then watched as we entered a period of tyranny by 1,000 cuts under the auspices of a crisis. The political notions of left versus right were ripped up to be replaced by authoritarian versus libertarian. I would go so far as to say moral versus immoral. Was it right, for instance, to deprive a 103-year-old woman, a care home resident that I remember so clearly, from seeing her grandchildren? Of course it wasn't. It was cruel and nonsensical. But as the late filmmaker Albert Maysles said, tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance. We had a parliament with a completely flaccid opposition, a cosy media happy to look the other way whilst governments greased their palms with £300 million of advertising budget, filling prime-time pockets whilst some commercial brands were literally unable to sell their wares, never mind advertise them. The Bill Gates and taxpayer-funded BBC became a government propaganda machine, allowing no dissenting voices. Doormat judges deferred to medical experts whilst turning a blind eye to perverse financial conflicts of interest. And the police force, our wonderful police force, seemed pressurised into becoming agents of the state rather than representatives of the public. In today's show, we're still going to be looking at the Public Order Bill, which will impose further restrictions on minority voices trying to be heard. Few of us admire public schoolboys gluing their faces to pavements, but are we in danger of surrendering our freedom to protest, another right that you never think you will need until one day you find that you do? And do you understand that the World Health Organization Treaty actually means handing over power from our government to global governance? We've already been discussing that, and hopefully you understand that in a little bit more detail, so that when the WHO rings the bell for the next pandemic and your democratically elected government potentially hands over all those powers, at least we will know where we are up to. And what about the online world? A place which became a refuge for many freedom advocates to find each other during the pandemic. Well, the pending online safety bill will gag anyone who dares counter the next wave of groupthink. If you're already feeling that your freedom of speech is being choked, you need to keep watching to grasp the magnitude of what is coming next. And it's Eurovision tonight. The UK hasn't done very well in the competition since Brexit, but one former British winner will join me live on the show. Obviously, you're free to switch off. Who am I to stop you? But I'd rather you stuck around. OK, welcome back. It is our Culture Raw segment now, when we debate a hot topic in the culture wars. And this week, we're going to be debating the so-called Public Order Bill and how to tackle disruptive action by groups like Extinction Rebellion. The bill was unveiled in the Queen's speech earlier in the week, and it aims to give the police new powers to stop activists blocking roads and some types of protests, such as gluing or locking yourself to buildings if the mood takes you. Critics, however, say that police have already got powers to stop illegal and disruptive demos and claim that legitimate forms of protest could also be outlawed. So I really want to hear both sides of this debate. So joining me now, I'm delighted to say, Donna Jones, the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and Donahue McCarthy, a climate columnist at The Independent. Donahue, I will come to you first. I used a bit of a stereotype there, didn't I, about the Extinction Rebellion lot being public schoolboys gluing their faces to the pavement. Is that something which annoys you? Would you like to redress that terrible image?
Well, it's quite hysterical because Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil are accused of being posh Tarquins, middle-class lobbies and working-class layabouts. So in a way, actually, the media are saying the truth. People in Extinction Rebellion come from all backgrounds because they are all concerned about the terrifying impacts of the climate crisis that's now unfolding us. So, yeah, it is a cliche and it's completely untrue.
OK, Donna, the Public Order Bill. Is this really something that we need, or do the police not have already sufficient powers? They, for some reason, are just not using them.
Well, what we know from the protests over the last 12 months is that, no, the police's powers are not sufficient. And I absolutely agree with you, Bev, that people have a right to protest, but so do the millions of people that live in this country that have been disrupted by these protests, have a right to go about their business unaffected. And where we have people wanting to protest about oil, for example, and about, the carbon footprint of people in this country, so stop oil, insulate Britain, if they had been stood on the side of motorways protesting, I think people would have had a lot more sympathy with them. But when they glued themselves to motorways, one of the busiest motorways in Europe, the M25, and they stopped people from getting to hospital, they stopped kids from getting to school, people going to work, and people being able to, for example, go on holiday, they lost people's sympathy. And, having the protests we've had at key national infrastructures, I think only the protesters have got themselves to blame for why we've got this new public order bill being brought forward by the government.
Donahue, I have to say, I think I do slightly agree with Donna in that the methods chosen by the protesters are not going to win the hearts and minds of the public. No matter how much we agree with you that our planet is in trouble, your means of going about it is going to be counterproductive.
Well, it's rather hilarious for the Commissioner to say that people should have stood on the side of the motorway with a placard, because you know damn well, Bev, we would not be here talking about this issue right now if they had done just that. Historically, Britain has had a tradition of disruptive protest. It has always been illegal, but actually what we're now moving to is actually a punitive code of law to actually penalise people, so to suppress such tradition completely. When you're talking about 10 years in jail and millions of pounds fine for simply gluing yourself disruptively, that is a Putinesque punishment. And what we should be doing is listening to the protesters and acting on it, rather than introducing piece of legislation after legislation after legislation to suppress the protest. There's an extraordinary thing happened today, Bev. It hasn't featured on the news very much. India has banned food exports because of the climate crisis in India. We are also facing dreadful crop production in China, America, and Argentina. The climate crisis is real. It's affecting millions of people already, will affect billions. And what government should do is act on the crisis rather than shooting the messenger, which is these protesters.
OK, I don't want us to particularly get into a debate about whether the climate crisis is real, because I think we could go down that rabbit hole very, very easily. Donna, how do we get the balance right, though, about being able to protest? Because if it wasn't for the suffragettes doing things that would be illegal under this public order bill, we wouldn't have the vote, you and I. There has to be a balance struck, surely. And does Donoghue have a point that the punitive measures here just don't fit the crime?
Well, we start with the correct facts, and the correct facts are not 10 years in prison. The correct facts are for the new charge that would come in of locking on, a maximum of 12 months in prison. For the new offence under the public order bill of disrupting major networks, up to 12 months, 6 months in prison, and for disrupting key national infrastructure such as oil refineries, it would be up to 12 months in prison, and there are fines associated to that as well. And I think, you're absolutely right about the suffragette movement. This country has a fantastic democracy, a fantastic legal system, one of the most revered legal systems in the world. And actually the suffragettes are a great example. But whilst they did do a number of alarmist type protests, actually they built their cause in a way that took the public with them by having protests that didn't disrupt everyday people's lives. They allowed them to take them on that journey. And actually this is where I disagree with what
that is complete farce. It's a dreadful interpretation of history.
Also agree that we need to have, we need to be looking after the climate. We need to be burning less carbon. We need to be producing more of our own foods and not bringing them in from around the world. I completely sympathise with the cause, but I also sympathise with standing up for the vast majority of law-abiding people in this country who would be far more sympathetic to the cause if they weren't sitting on motorways as they were over the last 6-7 months for 6 or 7 hours at a time, whilst people were locking on and gluing themselves to roads. That is illegal and it cannot continue.
Donoghue, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to correct a number of things there. First of all, the penalties under the new police bill is 10 years and unlimited fine for public disruption. That is a fact, and it is a punitive imposition on protest. Secondly, your history of the suffragettes is extraordinary. The actual government at the time brought in bills like this to shut down the disruptive protests by the suffragettes. It actually changed law, just like your government is changing the law. And rather than act and give women the vote, they brought in punitive laws to suppress the movement. Exactly what's happening to the climate movement right now. And thirdly, the point about the government acting on climate is shocking. What is happening to the government is that they're have committed to expanding North Sea oil and actually squeezing, they said, quote unquote, squeezing every last drop. The UN General Secretary said, it is madness, it is criminal to expand fossil fuels in the middle of the crisis that we're currently facing. And what you as Commissioner should be doing is should be acting on the real eco-terrorists, which are the banks and oil companies threatening billions of people's future lives on this planet. Why don't you act?
This is a conversation. This is definitely a conversation, is it not, about balance? It is the balance between us taking measures to fix the planet and the balance between you guys being allowed to protest without causing too much disruption. However, my fear, listening to this debate, is that we will never agree on what that looks like. And so as you guys do harder and harder, more disruptive action, the police will come down with greater and greater punitive measures. It feels like there can be no solution here.
That's exactly what happened to the suffragettes.
Right.
It's exactly what happened to the apartheid movement.
Sorry,
exactly
sorry, Donoghu. If we could just let me go to Donna Jones. Sorry, Donna. Last word.
Bev, I agree and I sympathise with the cause. You know, I want my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren to live in the cleanest world possible. My son has asthma. I'm sure that's caused by the fact that we live in a city. You know, I'm not immune to these issues. I want Britain to get cleaner. I want us to be more self-sufficient from a food perspective. But I also want to make sure that through law and order, through police forces, we are there to serve all members of the community. And that means those that are choosing to go to work, choosing to go on holiday, choosing to take their relatives to hospital or their kids to hospital. This is making sure that protests can be done in a safe way as well. People put their lives at risk, as we know, gluing themselves to motorways, locking on, climbing, abseiling up huge buildings. What we need to do is to be having a much more intelligent conversation around these things. And whilst Donoghu makes some really good points, which I absolutely can see his passion there, what I do want to say is that we have got one of the governments in the world that is leading the way on climate change. We have made more pledges to make this country greener, quicker than any other. We are investing more money than any of our European partners in battery technology. We've pledged over £10 billion to battery technology over the last 5 years to make sure we can have electric cars, we can have buses that are electric, trains that are electric. We are trying to do what we can. And yes, I get the point that Donoghu makes about North Sea oil. I really, really do. Unfortunately, not just the Conservative government, successive governments have been slow and lazy at moving away on this oil dependency fuel, providing across the UK. But for me as a police commissioner, this is about making sure that our roads are safe, our key national infrastructure is safe, and the protesters, please protest, don't stop, just do it in a safe and law-abiding way.
Thank you so much. Probably the good news is that none of us can afford to fill our cars at the moment or turn on our cookers. So I imagine, Donoghu, you should at least be happy about that. Donna Jones, Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner at Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and Donoghu McCarthy, climate columnist at The Independent. Thank you very much for that debate. Now we are going to take a quick break. Plenty more to come this afternoon. We're going to be discussing Eurovision in just a moment. The UK's had a hard time in the competition since Brexit, and before, I think. But I'm going to be speaking to a former British winner from Bucksfizz. Stay tuned.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking fine and dry, but the increasing risk of showers moving into southwest England. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off in southwest England, and there'll be a risk of showers here this evening. Some could be heavy, with the risk of some hail and thunder. Southeast England and London will be dry at 7 o'clock this evening, though the risk of showers increases later, feeling warm and muggy. Much of Wales will be dry this evening, but there will be an increasing risk of showers in the south, some perhaps heavy and thundery. Over to the Midlands, and it will be dry with sunny spells this evening, but the risk of a few showers perhaps moving into the far south later. Feeling warm and humid. It'll be a fine end to the day across northern England with plenty of sunshine ahead of dusk. Patches of cloud, but dry with temperatures around 15 Celsius, making it rather warm. A few lingering showers across Shetland, otherwise a fine and dry end to the day across Scotland, with light winds and plenty of sunny spells before dusk. 16 degrees in Edinburgh. Northern Ireland will see a fine end to Saturday with sunshine for all, albeit rather hazy. On the warm and humid side here too, with Belfast around 17 degrees Celsius. Heavy showers will continue to move northwards as we move into the early hours, some perhaps thundery. The driest weather found across Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Join me, Anaya Falarin Iman, for the discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here. From big ideas to questions shaping the public conversation, we tackle the moral, cultural and political implications of news stories.
We need to share this conversation democratically.
It has become so toxic, this debate.
They relish this kind of discourse.
From fascinating guests to challenging ideas, you won't want to miss it. The discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here, GBNews.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Welcome back. It's Bev Turner sitting in for Darren Grimes. Now, it's Eurovision tonight. Well, you're either for Eurovision or you're generally not that bothered, are you? But unsurprisingly, Ukraine is hot-tipped to win. The UK's had a bad run in recent years. We finished at the bottom of the leaderboard in 2019. 2020 was cancelled, of course, due to the pandemic. And in 2021, our entry, James Newman, scored 0 points in both the jury and audience votes. The first song to score 0 on both counts in Eurovision history. Aren't we marvellous? Reasons to be proud. But my next guest did much better than that. Of course, we all remember her winning the 1981 Eurovision Song Contest with the Making Your Mind Up song from Bucks Fizz. Jay Aston joins us now. Hi, Jay. Nice to see you. You are the perfect person to talk to today, because not only did you win Eurovision and go on to have a very successful music career, you also stood as a Brexit MEP, so you understand that the competition always features a subtle, arguably subliminal political element, and this year will be no different, will it?
Well, probably not. I imagine there'll be a huge vote for Ukraine, and I will be one of those people voting. I've got to say, in the past, I thought it was kind of a shame that, it should have been a song contest, and obviously the political thing did sort of creep in. But it has been for decades, and it just wasn't just about Brexit. I used to get quite upset about that. I mean, that's far more recent. We haven't won since the mid-90s, and we just haven't been putting the right songs in. So hopefully tonight we'll do better.
Has the contest evolved since your win in 81? So are you saying it didn't have that same political element back then?
Well, we had far few countries, obviously. You know, Europe has grown enormously. And so you could sort of second guess sort of what Germany and France and maybe Spain would vote for. And we only won by a few votes, which I do think might have had something to do with the skirts. Literally, everyone gave us a few points, but we didn't get big points. So, yeah, I mean, it was a very different competition to what we have today. And we've got all far more Eastern Bloc kind of countries. So it's changed hugely. And obviously, we've been doing terribly badly. But I really don't feel it was just about Brexit, because it hasn't been great since the mid-90s for us. We just haven't been putting the right act in. But I do think Sam, with his Spaceman song, has really got a chance. I think we should get into like the top 5.
So this is our guy then for tonight. He's a TikTok superstar. His name is Sam Ryder. His song Spaceman. It's got all the glitz and the glamour we can see there, and the performance is as important, isn't it, as the song itself?
Absolutely. It is how you deliver it on the night. And what happens so often, and I think it happened a lot last year, is you have to do so many performances to get different countries behind you, like loads of rehearsals and loads of PR. So by the time you get to the gig, you're exhausted, and quite often your voice is. And so I just hope he's managed to kind of save it for tonight. But I think he knows what he's doing. He's really a different kettle of fish to what we've been putting in. He's a star. He literally is. I really hope he does well. He's got my vote. Well, I'm going to vote for Ukraine. We can't vote anyway for our own people, but, you know.
Well, is it just tell me, because I'm not a Eurovision expert. Is it still voted for just by the judges, or do the public now get a vote as well? I presume we do, don't we? We seem to be able to vote on everything on our phones now, on any of these competitions.
Yeah, no, there is still a judge vote. And generally, we do quite well on that. But it's when the public vote comes in that we end up back at the bottom of the leaderboard. So we haven't been pleasing, you know, the general public across Europe. And I just think obviously we've got tap management involved this time. They took it away from BMG, and I think that obviously wasn't working. They've tried a winning team, and they found him. Obviously, he was kind of discovered through the pandemic, because he started to get millions of followers just doing his songs on TikTok. So there wasn't a lot of A&R involved with that. They literally just decided, you know, this guy is a star. And I think they've got a great team, you know, with the PR, with the way he looks, with the staging and the costume. And he's just got some kind of bit of X factor, I think.
Yeah. What do you do, Jay, on Eurovision night? Do you get all your friends round? Do you all watch it together?
Well, actually, I think Cheryl's having a party.
So you can go there. Brilliant. We will all go there. I'm sorry to cut you off, Jay. We have to move on. But Eurovision is on tonight, and it sounds like we can back our guy, which is fantastic. Former Eurovision winner there. Thank you so much, Jay Aston from Bucks Fizz. You are watching GB News on TV and listening on DAB radio. Next up, serious safety incidents logged by paramedics in England skyrocketed in the last year, but by how much? I will let you know in just a moment, and we'll debate what to do with an NHS in crisis. But now it is time to check on the news headlines with Miranda Shunker.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3:33. The top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister will visit Northern Ireland on Monday amid a political standoff at Stormont. It's after the Democratic Unionist Party blocked the election of an Assembly Speaker, preventing a new executive from forming. The move was a protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol. DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson told GB News that the heart of the Good Friday Agreement is consensus, and not a single recently elected unionist agrees on the post-Brexit trading agreement.
It is harming our economy, it is undermining political stability, it actually contravenes the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement, because at the heart of that agreement is there shall be no change to the constitutional status of Northern Ireland without the consent of its people, and yet there has been no consent given for this protocol. And so if we're to restore power sharing on the basis of consent or consensus in Northern Ireland, then the protocol needs to be dealt with, and I've been calling on the government to take decisive action in the absence of agreement with the EU to remove the Irish Sea border.
Boris Johnson has revealed the first 50 migrants have been told they'll be sent to Rwanda within the next 2 weeks. In an interview with the Daily Mail, the Prime Minister says he's ready for a fight with what he calls lefty lawyers seeking to challenge the government's plan for asylum seekers. Finland's president has spoken to his Russian counterpart about the country's plan to join NATO. President Sauli Niinistö says the phone conversation with Vladimir Putin was direct and without aggravation. The Kremlin says President Putin told Finland abandoning its neutrality and joining NATO would be a mistake. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. We'll be back to Real Britain with Bev Turner in just a moment. Stay with us.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi, yes, I can hear you.
Welcome back. Now, serious safety incidents logged by paramedics in England skyrocketed 77% in the last year as waiting times rose and a shortage of ambulances took hold. There were 551 serious safety incidents in the 12 months to March 2022. Compared with 312 in the year to March 2020. Official figures revealed that this week. They are shocking numbers, but the NHS seems to be in a constant state of crisis and continually needs more taxpayers' money. After the pandemic, now could be the time to seriously think about reforming this faltering institute, some might say. So joining me now, our Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs, Mark Littlewood, and former Labour Party advisor and communications consultant, Scarlett Maguire. Good afternoon, both of you. Now, the NHS has been the jewel in Britain's crown for nearly 75 years, and in an ideal world, I think most people would love to keep it. But Scarlett, it seems to be becoming increasingly unable to keep pace with our health crises. What should we do?
I think we should take it more seriously, actually. I mean, the NHS needs 4% extra of taxpayers' money every year to keep pace. I mean, if you think children who before would die of leukemia are now living, everybody's living longer. I mean, of course, it's going to cost more and more money. The crisis actually is because we don't have a social care plan. So we have masses and masses of people in hospital who shouldn't be in hospital. They should be in care homes or even in the community, but we don't have proper social care. There's 100,000 employee vacancies for the NHS. partly actually caused by Brexit. And on top of that, whenever there are rethinking, we have a government reorganisation that costs millions and doesn't do anything. I mean, actually, what we need to do is to take the NHS as it is seriously. I mean, I am old enough to have gone through decade after decade of people saying what we need is to reform something different. Actually, what we need is to actually look at the NHS and put the money where it's needed instead of these ridiculous reorganisations.
Mark, it isn't a bottomless pit. It simply needs a little more money.
Well, I agree with Scarlett. I mean, it's a truism, isn't it? If you do spend more money on things, you tend to get better results. But Bev, you said at the top of the item that the NHS has been our jewel in the crown. You know what? I'm not so sure. I think here in the UK, we have a bit of a little Englander attitude towards it. We consider it to be the envy of the world, but it's pretty remarkable that virtually no other country in the world has sought to replicate our system. What are they doing wrong? I mean, apparently they're looking over the English Channel to us, green with envy, but are all too foolish to have an NHS themselves. I think the time's come to have a fundamental look at our healthcare system and to ask ourselves, might it just be possible that we've got more to learn from the rest of the world than to teach it? Might it just be possible that the Dutch or the Swiss or the Germans have actually found a better mechanism of providing healthcare to their entire population than we have? And I think if you start looking through the statistics, Bev, you were mentioning, I mean, the NHS seems to be permanently in crisis every winter for sure, and beyond that as well. That doesn't happen in Germany. It's apparently not a surprise to the German healthcare system that it gets cold in winter. So I wonder whether post-pandemic we should really have a survey of the entire healthcare schemes across the Western world and ask ourselves, are we certain the NHS is the best one? Because I'm not at all sure it is.
We've got 6.2 million people on the waiting list at the moment, Scarlett. I think a lot of those people have already given up on the NHS, and if they can afford it, they are trying to find private doctors, which is not what any of us want, because then we have a two-tier country in which only the wealthy can afford to be well.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think the waiting list is absolutely appalling. I think the fact that we've stopped having targets for ambulances is dreadful. I mean, I think what's going on is terrible. But I don't think the problem is how we pay for it or whether we should have it through insurance or something. The problem is there's a fundamental thing, is the NHS has to be properly funded and it has to be properly run. And one of the things is that you have to have a social care policy that goes along with the NHS so that old people in particular are got out of hospitals, into care homes, back into their homes. You need wraparound care. And that's the only way that we're going to do it, right? It's not that I'm saying that France or Germany, haven't got good systems. What I'm saying is we are where we are. I mean, is Mark seriously saying that we need a complete fundamental rethink? The government this year has put in yet another reform that is just going to cost lots and lots of money and is reconfigured. It's not helping the waiting lists. When David Cameron came in, the first thing he cut NHS because we were in the age of austerity, and he put in the Lansley reforms, which have been a complete disaster. In fact, most of the reforms to the NHS are a disaster. What we need more people in the NHS. We need staff who can actually do their jobs. Right.
Thank you.
And then we need to look at the other thing that other countries do, where we really need to catch up with Europe, is early diagnosis. And that is why.
Thank you, Mark. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It was short, it's sweet. It's a powerful debate from both sides. Thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. I think, like I said at the beginning, I think all of us feel that actually we would like, of course we would like in an ideal world, the NHS, but whether it is sustainable, I'm not sure that it is. OK, thanks, guys. Right, we are moving on now to scrap, reform, keep. And this time we're looking at the so-called online safety bill, which also featured in the Queen's speech this week, as the government brings it back before Parliament. The bill seeks to restrict the internet in the UK more than any other democratic Western nation, or as the government says, make Britain the safest place in the world to be online. But do you trust these governments to have your best interests at heart? Here to help us all understand this in detail is author of 2022 bestseller, A State of Fear, How the Government Weaponised Fear in the Pandemic. Laura Dodsworth, lovely to see you. Laura.
Hello.
Now, sum up for us what this bill is going to do. How is life going to be different for us online than it is at the moment?
Well, the online safety bill seeks to address some quite important issues. So much has already been talked about, some of the key problems. That it seeks to protect the British public from harm online. The problem is that harm is subjectively defined, and the government doesn't want to just protect children from harm, which would seem very obvious and worthwhile, and you can think of all the obvious types of harm, but also adults. So much has been written about how it's potentially a censor's charter because it can restrict legal but harmful speech, and by doing so also restrict our freedom of expression, which is a human right, and how that can also impact journalism. I feel that one aspect which hasn't been discussed anywhere near enough, so we could talk about that now, and I wrote about it for The Spectator online, is the use of algorithms. Now, I would say that one of the really chief pressing causes of harm online in recent years has been big tech's use of algorithms which are shrouded in secrecy. So Twitter uses algorithms, as does Facebook, as does Instagram. We don't know exactly how they work, but we know that what they do is prioritise and suppress content, and that can be according to things like how many likes or shares content gets. We know it can also be about promoting content which encourages lots of comment, which in itself can therefore stoke controversy and division once content owners know how to game that. There's also a suspicion, that it's not confirmed, that some platforms might be suppressing certain ideological and political viewpoints. Now, I spoke to an online social media editor at a big 24-hour UK news channel who told me that things like Extinction Rebellion do really well, but race and immigration get pushed down. The annual NSPCC reports on child abuse and child grooming often don't do very well, and maybe that's because of a misguided attempt to protect us online from paedophilia. The problem is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Now, the online safety bill represented an opportunity to push for transparency. Instead, what it does is suggest that Ofcom should be given the explicit power to audit, review, and regulate algorithms. I'm going to give you a comparative example. Let's think about food companies. Food companies have to put the ingredients and nutritional content on labels so you know how much sugar you're consuming. But right now, there's no imperative for social media platforms to tell you they use algorithms or how they work. And what the online safety bill is going to do is take the public even further out of that and put the relationship between Ofcom and the government and big tech.
Frightens us, isn't it, Laura? Do you feel like me that you have a completely different perspective of this topic now than you did 2 years ago? This just wasn't something that we were bothered about. Maybe we had more trust in big business. We had more trust in government. Looking back, I realise we were all incredibly naive.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think there's a way in which the public is somewhat red-pilled now by the government's COVID pandemic response. This is what I'm talking about, the road to hell being paved with good intentions. We have a Conservative government which has dictated that we must stand 2 metres from each other, and whether you can have a pint based on whether you have a substantial meal, whether we take our own serving spoons to people's houses, and also deployed the full force of state machinery to suppress counter-narrative views and to frighten the public into compliance with the rules. Now, do we want a government which has behaved like that during a crisis to control the internet in the same way? I would much rather that we had a great deal more transparency. Do you know what I would like? When I go onto Twitter, that it has to declare it uses algorithms and then reveal them, a bit like an ingredients list. We use algorithms that prioritises content or deprioritises content based on these functions, and it gives me the opportunity to even turn that off so that all my content would be served chronologically. Instead, the government wants Ofcom to have a private relationship with Twitter to review those algorithms. So yes, I do have quite low trust in the government myself. I think I'm not alone. It's not just you and me, it's a lot of the public. And instead of the government taking control, I'd rather we had a lot more transparency. I think a lot of us felt quite a lot of hope recently when Elon Musk actually said publicly on Twitter he's worried about the de facto bias in the Twitter algorithm, because Twitter is very much a public square where people can communicate and organise politically. And it would be great to see the power being given back to the people in the public square.
Thank you, Laura. Brilliant as always. I think we'll understand it a little bit more now. It does sound very sinister, and I think we should all be very aware of what we're reading, what we're consuming. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Laura Dodsworth, author of A State of Fear, How the Government Weaponised Fear During the Pandemic. Now, a story which is growing closer to everyone's hearts by the hour. Dame Deborah James has been a vibrant awareness raiser of bowel cancer whilst undergoing her own treatment for the last 5 years. And this week, she sadly announced that she's now opting for palliative care at home with her 2 children, husband Seb and her parents. She's also launched the Bowel Babe Fund for Cancer Research and has reached almost £6 million in less than a week. And I am delighted to say that Emma Campbell, Debbie's very good friend and fellow cancer survivor, has joined us now. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. Mixed, such an emotional week and such a week of extremes with the emotions, the kind of heavy-hearted sadness that so many of us have been carrying. Yeah. Those of us who are lucky enough to know Debs and hundreds and thousands who've watched her journey over the last 5 years. You know, this is the phase we never wanted to get to. Yeah. But then the shift, you know, from the announcement of the fund and then the damehood, it's been an amazing week.
And you know, people who don't know Deborah maybe, because she hasn't been, she is on telly quite a lot, but she's, in terms of her following on social media, is huge. She's one of the biggest names on Instagram. She's one of the biggest names on these platforms. And when I go onto my Instagram, the person I want to see is Bowel Babe. Yeah. Because not only is she informing us about cancer, and we all need to understand that more, she manages to do it, Emma, looking gorgeous all the time, looking glamorous, looking sexy, being vibrant, being engaging. Is she like that in real life? I'm lucky to know her a little as well, but you've obviously spent hours with her.
She absolutely is. She is a force of nature, that spirit, that glow, that radiance that you see even on the difficult days that she's had is just evident and tangible.
I think we've got some footage, actually, of the two of you receiving your treatments together in hospital, because she would put you on her, and you both have your Instagram accounts. Yeah. There you are, having a lovely time together.
Through the screen, the COVID screen.
Through the COVID screen. Oh. She's looking really frail now. There's the pictures on the front page of the paper today, and obviously Prince William went round and gave her damehood. How will she be feeling about this almost £6 million fund in such a short period of time?
I think, from what I can sense and what I think we can all see, is that she's feeling completely overwhelmed, completely humbled by what's happening, and I imagine so held in a kind of in love and support and the admiration and the pride that we all have. And I think I can't even imagine how the last few days could be topped, you know, in any way, in terms of these crucial times for her and the memories and seeing those pictures and that beautiful smile.
I know.
That never really fades.
I know.
You know.
Even the picture yesterday when she had her damehood as a brooch. And I thought only Deborah could make that brooch.
I know.
Look that beautiful, and that she made it fashion. And she's amazing.
Yeah, and that's her spirit, and that is, I think, what has been the sort of magnetic quality of her. When I met her 5 years ago, right at the beginning of her journey, and sort of 7 years into mine. But I've said this to her a few times, and I don't think she sort of has really absorbed it, but she was a pivotal point in my shift from being someone who was paralysed by the fear of cancer and what that might mean and what that possibly would mean, but also kind of she taught me how to live, really, how to live with something in the biggest, boldest way possible.
And she did her podcast at the Big C, and she talked about that. She had a really traumatic incident a little while ago, didn't she, where she thought that she was saying goodbye, and she talks about that really poignantly. And it sounds like a very macabre thing to say, but I personally am really happy that she's getting to spend this time with her family. Yeah. Is there such a thing as a good death, as a good goodbye?
I think if there is, this is it. I think the tragedy is undeniable, and the premature ending to an amazing life and what that's going to mean for her loved ones and everyone who adores her. But to have, I guess you've got to look at it as the inevitability is unfolding. But she's surrounded by love, she's held, she's seeing all of this wonderful, all the events of the last week. She's actually here to see it, to see those figures go up. And I think this is as good a death, if I can even say that, as one could hope for.
Absolutely. We've all had to think about mortality a lot in the last couple of years, haven't we? And I've often looked at her and, on a bad day, you realise our bad days are not bad days compared to what her... And also yourself with your own health journey.
I think a cancer diagnosis brings life into a sharp focus, and I think it can sound like a cliche, but you do have a heightened sense of appreciation and awareness of what's important in life, and your perspective is altered. And I think, and as someone who lives with cancer myself, is lucky enough to be in a stable place, but you can't help but be around Deborah and not be absolutely blown away by her spirit, and you can't help but think that if she can do it, I can do it.
Absolutely. And we would just urge all of you to look at the Bell Babe Fund, donate, put a smile on her face, and we wish her and the family all the best, don't we? Emma Campbell, thank you.
Thank you
so much. Sadly, we have run out of time. You have been watching Real Britain with me, Bev Turner. Thank you ever so much for your company. This show is every Saturday and Sunday at 2 o'clock. Next weekend, I will be covering for Neil Oliver on Saturday night, so I will see you then. But I will leave you now with the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking fine and dry, but the increasing risk of showers moving into southwest England. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off in southwest England, and there'll be a risk of showers here this evening. Some could be heavy, with the risk of some hail and thunder. Southeast England and London will be dry at 7 o'clock this evening, though the risk of showers increases later, feeling warm and muggy. Much of Wales will be dry this evening, but there will be an increasing risk of showers in the south, some perhaps heavy and thundery. Over to the Midlands, and it will be dry with sunny spells this evening, but the risk of a few showers perhaps moving into the far south later. Feeling warm and humid. It'll be a fine end to the day across northern England, with plenty of sunshine ahead of dusk. Patches of cloud, but dry with temperatures around 15 Celsius, making it rather warm. A few lingering showers across Shetland, otherwise a fine and dry end to the day across Scotland, with light winds and plenty of sunny spells before dusk. 16 degrees in Edinburgh. Northern Ireland will see a fine end to Saturday with sunshine for all, albeit rather hazy. On the warm and humid side here too, with Belfast around 17 degrees Celsius. Heavy showers will continue to move northwards as we move into the early hours, some perhaps thundery. The driest weather found across Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.